go. I wanted to follow up a little bit on Jon Gray from last night. It was such a good performance. Um, I was wondering if you could just take us into a little bit more about how Jon has developed that changeup, because I know that we all know that the slider and fastball were his coming out of college, and then he incorporated the curve. And I guess his changeup kind of snuck up on me, so to speak. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, and I think it's sort of, it snuck up on me a little bit in spring training, but the last couple of years, the last couple of years have been uneven, in baseball in general, right? And I think with Jon, even going back to 2019, when he broke his foot, had a little bit of a, up and down year overall, and then last year, a little bit of the shoulder woes. So, I mean, just hasn't really been able to get, on any sort of a roll the last couple of years, 19 and 20. This year, we talked about his off-season program. And I think the off-season program incorporated, a lot of different areas. So I think physically and mentally coming into Arizona for spring this year, he was in a really good place. And with that, the instruction and the conversation about the changeup took hold. And I think, from day one in spring training, there was an emphasis on the use of the changeup for Jon. Pitching coaches, Steve and Daryl, and the rest of our pitching group in Arizona, really made that a priority for Jon, and Jon, completely bought in to the repetitions that he needed to grow in his side sessions, batting practices, his exhibition games. And there had to be obviously from the catcher and Jon, a plan going into each and every spring training game to throw changeups, to throw a lot of them, just to continue to develop the pitch. And that carried into the season. And I think that Dom and Elias both, have trusted it and have called it in games, as opposed to going to the fallback option of always going to the slider as his first secondary pitch. So, I'm proud of Jon to have the trust in that pitch when, your performance is on the line in a big league game, and not, going back to a pitch that has, been so instrumental in your success. He's been able to, use the pitch without any, mental consequences of it failing. And that's how you develop the pitch, by throwing it and believing in it and living with the results, even if there is a negative outcome on the pitch. So, and he's used it, and it's been successful, and it's been functional, and it's been good. So, here's to continued use of it. And I think there's a belief in the catchers, a belief with Jon, and there's a belief in us as a coaching staff that it's going to become a very good weapon for him, and one of the things that's going to get him through this year as a successful pitcher.
And one follow-up to that, and forgive me for not knowing this, did you throw a change?
Yes.
Okay.
I was okay. Wasn't in my era. We had some guys who had great changeups. Teddy Aguirre, Frank Viola, to name a few, and then later in my career, Tom Glavine, sort of set the standard. He and Maddox for changeups, but of the left-handed pitchers, in my era, Viola stood out. That was a great change. And then it sort of turned to Glavine, and now Glavine and Maddox. But it's such a good weapon, and I think it's such a good weapon here in Denver.
And one more, I've always found that pitch fascinating. It fascinates me. When you have a guy like a Jon Gray, or a number of guys who make their mark, so to speak, as power guys, I mean, that's what they are. They're big, they're strong. Is it more difficult for them to eventually incorporate, and I'm going to use the word finesse pitch. I know it's not really a finesse pitch, but
Oh, yeah, it is a finesse.
okay, to embrace that pitch, and
It
is it more difficult?
I think so. I do, especially if you've had success as a true power pitcher, hard fastball, hard slider. You know, to really become a guy that has a good changeup. And first of all, it's harder to, when you have the arm speed and the hand speed that power pitchers have, right? Velocity comes from hand speed and how fast your, right to release point, how fast your hand is moving. The guys who throw the hardest have the fastest hand speed. So to have that feel for a changeup, which is usually a grip that is unconventional to throw a baseball, whether it's a circle change, a ball, a split grip, you don't throw a ball, with great feel when it's an uncomfortable grip. So the grip has to become comfortable over time, and then you have to have that feel with quick arm speed. It doesn't happen overnight. That's why it takes a long time for guys with great velocity to have a great change. Now, the exceptions are Pedro Martinez, tremendous hand speed. Eric Gagne for a couple of years, great velocity, great change. Those guys are rare. Maybe there's special pitchers. In Pedro's case, he's Hall of Fame, but it becomes a mindset as a pitcher. It's invaluable to have that type of pitch, and it takes a while to get that, to come off the I'm a true power pitcher, I'm going to get beat with my best stuff. It's called pitching. And I think Jon now, after 5 years, is to that point where he's evolving as a pitcher, and not. I don't want to put him into just the thrower category, because I think over time he has pitched and he's gotten better as a pitcher. But now it's really coming into focus that he is a pitcher and not a thrower or a power pitcher.
Great. Thanks, buddy. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Next, we'll go to Thomas. Go ahead, Thomas.
Yes, buddy. We were talking a little bit earlier with Dom Nunez, and he's hit some home runs on some fastballs. He really seems to be the type of guy that kind of lights up when he faces a guy who throws a fastball. What are you seeing from his approach that allows him to do that?
Yeah, again, we've talked about the fastball as a group, and I think with Dom, he never comes off the fastball. And there's been a lot of hitters who hit that way, and then they learn over time to make that adjustment, to hit secondary pitches. It's obviously it's a skill to be able to do both, but I think Dom will get there, over the early part of his career here. He'll become a hitter who can still stay on the fastball, but also react to secondary pitches or off-speed pitches. He's got that type of swing, that sort of lift in a swing that gets the ball in the air. He's got power, and he squares it up. It can go out of the park. I mean, the home runs that he hit, all sort of look similar, right? Pull fly balls. There's been some line drives on the pull side too that we've seen Dom. Whether it's in batting practice, whether it's in games, but moving forward, I think Dom will tell you that he wants to be that complete hitter where he uses the whole field, he hits all pitches, he can get a base hit the other way, he can move a runner from second to third with no outs, he can situational hit, he can cut the strikeouts down. That's where he wants to get to, but where he is right now is a guy just getting his feet wet in the big leagues, and we're getting him in there. But I love the confidence. I think he feels that he's going to hit. I think we think he's going to hit. And I think, if you have a left-handed catcher with power, that's always a good thing.
And one more from me. Robert Stevenson has looked increasingly good in the outings that he's had. What have you learned about him, and what's kind of the next step for him? Because it looks like he's throwing with a little bit of consistency this early in the year.
Yeah, you're right. The thing that has stood out, that was different than spring training, the fastball is in the strike zone, and the slider also is in the strike zone. I think what we saw in spring training was a little variability of both pitches. Again, he was new to us. We're getting to know him. We're evaluating. And there's a couple guys had, rocky spring trainings. And, when the season starts, things can change or things could not change, right? There might be a continuation of spring training performance, or there might be a drastic change, and the guy who had a poor spring could have a great start to the season. I think the key thing with Robert is we've seen the fastball in the strike zone, where in spring training, maybe not so much. I think the slider has always been pretty consistent from March, spring games until now. And I think there's growing confidence that, you get into the season, you have some good outings. I think that confidence grows, and, you trust your stuff a little bit more, and maybe not try to hit corners. And he's turning the ball loose with authority. I love the breaking ball. I think it's a good combination of pitches. So, we'll see where it goes. It's still so early in the year. Like I said, these guys are going to, if they stay healthy and they stay in our club, anywhere from 55 to 70 games as a major league relief pitcher who's in a big league bullpen and it's functional. He's got a lot of baseball left to be pitched this season, but we like what we're seeing so far.
And with him, were you involved much in the trade? I know that it looked like he and Hoffman were two guys that were talented and maybe needed a change of scenery. Were you a big voice in that trade and looking at what he did and the type of pitcher he was?
No, I became aware of the trade. I became a little bit aware when it was potentially getting close. And, but the early stages, the early conversations, I'm not sure who reached out to who, and how that dynamic went in the front office. But if that's a yes or no question, no, I wasn't a part of that trade discussion.
I guess I was a little bit more interested in the evaluation of Stevenson as far as a guy you could potentially get.
Again, we saw him a couple of years ago. He pitched against us in Cincinnati. I think he might have pitched against us here. Obviously I remember him, but I think, our pro scouts, who cover the Reds, we have reports on him through the course of the last couple of seasons in his career. We probably go far back as an amateur player. We have reports on him.
All right. Hey, thank you, buddy.
Yeah.
All right, buddy. Thanks for taking the time, man.
Okay.